I just thought like, okay, nobody asked me to do it, but I'm just gonna try. So I literally drew a circle first. I think we had version 20 by 2018.
Version 20.
Yeah. The map itself wasn't the most difficult. The most difficult part, I think, it would be to convince people. Yeah.
Welcome back to this channel. I hope that you're not sick of my face. It's been a while, but today it's not about me. I have a special guest in the studio, and that's Samuel Lim.
Hi, hello Joyce.
Hello. Wow, are you like that shy person? No, right?
No, not really. I just need to warm up a bit.
Okay, yes. I get you. Well, we may not hear him or seen him before, but we have definitely interacted with his works as long as you have been on the MRT before, right, Samuel?
Yes, hello everyone, I'm Samuel. I work on the wayfinding system and the new signage that you see, interact with along the Thomson East Coast line, as well as the new system map that you interact with almost daily, I assume.
TLDR, if you see the maps in the MRT platform, that's by him, right? Okay, so to understand more of his works, we have to go back to many years ago until we dig out these two maps, right? I don't even think I was born, when these maps are out. Right, Samuel?
We have never seen this map before.
Please,
we're too young
tell
for
us something about these maps.
Maybe we go all the way back to the first map that introduced the MRT line to Singapore. I think this map is very significant. And for those of us who was around then, which the both of us were not, I think it's significant because it's not usually easy to introduce a metro system to a city. It's very expensive, and it takes a lot of planning, a lot of coordination for it to happen. So for us to introduce a metro back then, right, it was a very big milestone in our nation's history, I would say. So this map played a very big role because it introduced to the citizens how to use a metro for the first time. Back then, we were all used to buses and it was a bit more chaotic, you would imagine, right?
Yeah.
So how do we systemize mass transit for a group of people who has not interacted with such network before? Our north-south line originally has two colors because we really need to simplify how to use the network for the people back then. Because I wasn't alive back then, I don't know. But you can assume that, let's say the orange line, right, is northbound. Then the red line is southbound. Please correct me if I'm wrong. But what I'm trying to tell you is that each color tells you each bound. So there's no confusion. It's like, if you take the yellow line or the orange line, you're going towards the north of Singapore. If you take the green, you're going towards the east or the west, for example. But of course, this is at the very early stage. We are really trying to teach people how to use the network and be more confident to move around such a big network that is only set to grow. So, and of course, we did grow. Our branch line over here towards Choa Chu Kang did eventually join up with the north-south line. So now this is the north-south line that we are all familiar with.
Yes.
Back then, the network allowed for these four colors for two lines. Right? I would say it's a luxury because eventually people will run out of colors. There's only so many colors on the spectrum.
All right, here's also a disclaimer. My director cannot find the actual map, so this is actually someone's work. But anyway, all credits goes back to the rightful owner.
So when North East Line was introduced to the network, I believe the authorities realized that we can't have 6 colors for 3 lines.
Yeah.
Eventually, the network will continue to go as planned. And then we will have to rethink about colors. And that's why this is the colors that we are all familiar with today. The red line is now known as the north-south line. So notice the blue line is now removed and it became green line for the east-west line. And then the new northeast line, which is the purple line that we are all very familiar with today. Then from here on, which is the year 2000, you can see that the network just continues to grow and grow. So we have our circle line introduced here. We dial back in time. This time we are alive already. You can see that the circle line actually grew over time because it was open in phases.
Yeah.
And then we have the downtown line, also a very massive line, fully underground. And this was the map that was launched when I just joined LTA. Yeah. So this is the map that I studied the most, I would say.
And of course, fast forward to today, this is the real one, okay? This one is something that everyone is very familiar. We need to unfold this. Look at this. This is the map that we see today in all our MRT stations. And this is also the map that brought Samuel here with us in the studio. Now, while you're explaining the whole transformation of the entire MRT lines on the map, what goes through my mind was like, how do you even plan all this? Like, how do you get into your head that all these MRT lines are going to look like that on the map? You know, how does your brain works?
I think it really helps that, first of all, we grew up with the metro network, right? So I would say it's much more difficult to be the first person to design this.
Yeah,
like for me,
definitely.
I had a baseline. I grew up with the MRT. I take it daily, and then I got very familiar with the network. So for me to upgrade the map or redesign it, right, it was more like a how can I make it better rather than growing something out of nothing. Yeah, so I would say, yes, it is quite convoluted and it's a bit complex. But there's always a starting point, right? And so maybe we talk a bit about what changed for this map. Yeah. One of the key changes that was introduced, obviously, is the circle that I think everybody noticed first. The circle is now circle.
Yes.
Yeah. What inspired me, honestly, to start this circle, right, was back when I was just joining. I just joined LTA back then.
Which is in 2015.
Yes,
you
in
joined.
2015.
Yeah.
I actually joined LTA for a different reason, for the science system, because it's part of my thesis back in uni. So I did a whole deep dive on what are some of the shortcomings we have in the network today, and then I published it as part of my graduation thesis. So with that, the thesis got circulated within the government, and then it somehow landed in LTA. So I was very lucky that LTA wanted to speak with me about this. And then they eventually was like, do you want to join us to try to solve it together? So that was like quite crazy. Like you would think like, oh, I just wanted to voice my opinion, and then actually LTA wanted to hear it and want to do something about it.
That's nice.
Yeah,
like,
so that was quite...
problem solvers, right?
Yeah, it was really a privilege to be able to solve the problem with the real people behind it. Okay, back to the map. So about, I would say 6 months into my journey with LTA when I first started, which is, nobody was talking about the map, to be honest, because it wasn't a problem to be solved. The map is serving everyone properly. It's fine, right? It's just there. But then when I saw Moscow's map on the book, I saw that they had two very big circle tying the entire network together. That was quite a refreshing impression for me, because for the first time I felt like, oh wow, something actually tied the focus to something. Like instead of, like we were saying just now, right, a map is very complex.
Yes.
And if we have a very strict grid system, it can be quite difficult to start looking at where you are. So with the Moscow map, right, my first impression was, wow, there's now a focal point. I can now look at the circle as a starting point and then find my way around the network. I've never been to Moscow, but I don't feel intimidated looking at that map, their map. And that made me think, why isn't our circle line circle? Then at the same time, right, our circle line was announced, or rather LTA announced that circle line is now going to be completed as a full loop, which again, to me, is a very big milestone, because one thing that I always felt lacking is that Harbourfront is not connected to Marina Bay. And that to me, as a user, is very frustrating. But as a planner, you'll just be like, how come we cannot cross that barrier? Yeah, so when LTA finally announced it, right, I was very excited about it. So with these two things happening at the same time, right, I just thought like, okay, nobody asked me to do it, but I'm just gonna try. So I started planning around the circle. I literally drew a circle first, and then I mapped out every single station along the circle line, including the 3 future stations to close the loop.
Okay.
With that, right, as a grid, then I started to branch out all the interchanges along the circle line. That was how it all began, because I knew that it would be very impossible to fit the circle around the existing grid. So I had to literally break the rules. I think we had version 20 by 2018. Yeah, I would say
Version 20.
Yeah. I was looking through the history back then, and I think we really did a lot of iterations. And there were a lot of people giving us inputs. Okay, there are people who you would assume in the management, right? They are with the network since day one. They are the ones who, gave birth.
OG.
Yeah, the OGs. So they definitely have certain legacy they want to protect.
Yes,
right? There are certain ideas that are very ingrained into the Singapore commuters. So we can't go so crazy. So my job was really to push the boundary, and then we think of how to scale it back to something that we can balance. Yeah, so I have a designer who works alongside me in LTA. His name is Rizwan. He actually played a very big role in fixing some of the parts that I dislike. Okay, so you see this part of the most difficult part, right, actually is this area. Because it's very...
the City Hall,
Yeah.
Dhoby Ghaut area.
The concentration of stations within the city area, obviously, naturally, is much higher.
Yes.
because of connectivity. It's planned that way. But on the map, we can't really show the reality. If we scale this into the realities in terms of geography, right? This part will be super tight.
Tight, yeah.
Yeah, so what Rizwan helped was that he actually managed to solve this area with these 3 lines that I really appreciate. Because I had a hard time trying to solve this, and with his
The Outram Park
brilliance,
line.
yeah, this part he actually managed to fix, and I was very, very happy when we came together to deal with this. Then there was another one that one of our directors, who is an engineer background, she mentioned that the overlap here needs to be highlighted because our downtown line is quite unique.
Yes.
So
Yes,
we do
yes.
have an overlap between the Bencoolen to Jalan Besar versus Rochor to Bugis. And we wanted to highlight that, actually the lines don't, you can't take the train that bypasses it.
Yes, correct. Yeah.
So this is quite a interesting insight that we introduced. And then of course there are many other details that we introduced, like the waters. Okay, so I thought of introducing the waters, right? Because the Marina Bay, I feel, is very iconic for Singapore.
Yeah.
I believe everyone here can agree. But it being iconic is one thing. Getting people there is another. So now, right, you have
True,
people looking
true
for
that.
Marina Bay at all the wrong stations. So I wanted to use the water element to help people kind of make sense of where they are versus what landmark versus what station. Yeah, that's why the water was introduced. And of course, Singapore River, where it all began, right? So I thought it's kind of paying an homage to the first map that we ever had.
It's so interesting, you know, like when you talk about like how people actually might confuse themselves in like different landmarks or like stations, right? I would just think that tourists who comes over to Singapore, they'll be like, Marina Bay Station and Marina Bay Sands, are they the same?
Yeah, actually, that is a very big thing
Right.
that I really want to expand on.
Yeah, and I thought it's a nice touch that you guys differentiate the stations with like, you know, things, details like that, like
Yes,
water,
with landmarks.
and all.
Yeah.
Sorry to break you.
No, it's fine. So I just wanted to say that the water kind of goes back to this map.
Oh.
Where we had the water and the island of Singapore.
Okay.
Yeah, of course, we can't do it as detailed as this outline. So we try our best to come up with something similar, and that's why the water was reintroduced.
Dang.
Yeah.
Let me help you with that. Let me show everyone. Look at this. So it references from this, and then you still put the details back, you know, to our current MRT map as well.
Yeah, because I also want to highlight that our MRT network serves the entire island. Not many countries can say that.
Yeah.
You know, you may think that Singapore is bigger than this, right? Like there are areas that is not yet served. But
Yes.
no, actually Singapore is this
It's
small.
that.
and this is our network.
And we covered a lot of like most of the places actually.
And there's still room to grow, right? We
Yeah.
still have new lines coming soon.
Yeah.
Yeah. So downtown line and Thomson East Coast line, right?
Yeah.
The original design I had was that they run kind of parallel.
Oh, for
because-
TEL and downtown.
Yes,
Okay.
because in reality, that's how I see the map. Within this area, they run parallel on this road, and then there's another parallel here.
Okay.
But that design was a bit confusing because when they got too close together, it's not realistic.
Yes.
Yeah, because these two lines are actually quite far apart. We have the central catchment area that is protected between these two, right? So that's why there was a bit of a redesign here. And then another thing is, if you notice, this map is significantly smaller than the map that we have on display in the station.
Yeah.
So even then, right, we had to do minor tweaks
Oh.
to fit into this smaller version now. Oh yeah, one more thing. Yes, Sentosa Island, it used to not be separated like that on the map.
Oh.
And so people think that when they arrive at Harbourfront, right, they have already arrived at Sentosa.
You're right. You're right.
Yeah, and I made a very big point to like, no, it's separate, and there is another connection.
And that's why you had that continuation of the, what do you call it, the
The
dots,
Sentosa
right?
Express, yes, to connect to the island.
It is just to make information even more clearer so that as a tourist who have never been to Singapore before, they kind of know how to navigate their way
Yes.
through the map itself.
Yes, exactly that.
I like that. Okay, I have a very interesting finding, or I just knew it from Samuel, that wow, the distance of how you plan the maps, how to plan the stations on the map is also like a rough idea of how far these places are, right? I never knew TEL and Downtown Line, that square or rectangle space is like a rough distance that they're actually not near. I thought it was just a design.
Yeah, I mean, we try our best. It's always a struggle between designing a schematic map like that versus a geographically accurate map. Of course, I wouldn't tell people that you can use this and then, you will know how big is Singapore. Obviously, within the city, there are stations that you can walk easily between.
Correct.
But obviously, I wouldn't ask you to walk between our famous Khatib and Yio Chu Kang, right? It's not walkable. I mean, you can lah. Someone tried to walk now. You can hike.
Maybe if you all have walked before, let us know how long you guys take to walk there.
Yeah, it will be interesting to know also. But yeah, I think it's a fine line between giving what's real and what is useful. So that is where my job comes in. As a wayfinding consultant, right? We try to give people what's needed at the time rather than just tell the truth always. Because if we really give you everything, it may just make your whole journey much more difficult.
True that.
Yeah.
Too much information and then like having to find every single piece of information.
Yes. So it's about making decisions easier. Maybe if you allow me to just say a bit more.
Of course. Continue, man.
One key thing about the circle, right? I've noticed as a trend is that back then when we had the grid system, right? It wasn't so obvious that you can use the circle line as a transfer. Because I would say, okay, for a lack of a better word, I will use super connector as an example, okay? To me, it's a super connector between all our lines.
Okay.
It is the one line that connects to every single line. So making it into a circle gives an impression that you can just use it to hop across different lines rather than it is yet just another line. I want people to think of circle line as, the one that gets me to places faster. And therefore encourage people to not rely on the trunk line or the older lines that we are familiar with. Get them to, use more of the network and spread the crowd around. I thought that was quite critical, especially when our network becomes more crowded. Getting people to use the network more efficiently becomes an operational matter. So I like to think that I played a little bit of in that, which is to get people to use the circle line rather than stick onto a certain line and sit all the way through. The circle being a focal point. It matters because I thought it's easier for people to now recall, am I inside the circle or outside the circle? And then towards the north of the circle or towards
like
the east
part,
of the circle.
is it?
Yeah,
Maybe
like
this
so you can start
part of
your
the circle here.
Yes, you can start exploring, whether you are now within the circle area or are you towards the east or the west of the circle. So I think it helps dissect the space a little bit, the island, so that you can now find your way a little bit easier.
Wow. I need to say that I love the circle line, by the way.
I also, architecturally, I think circle line is damn nice.
Yeah, it got me from the northeast to the west pretty fast because you change at the Buena Vista, right? And it gets you faster.
Yeah.
That's why I love the circle line.
It's
and
like a trick, right?
Less packed, from the east-west line and the
But
north-south line.
now if this goes out, then maybe more people would use
which
the
is which is where you are driving people to,
Yes.
taking more efficient lines to get to where they are supposed to get, and not just being stuck in one way of traveling.
Yeah.
So you shared so much information, right? Is that the reason why it took you 4 years for the map to officially be shown to the public, right?
Okay.
2019, then the whole map came out to the public, right?
Yeah, it took us a while because, right, I think this is the part where we talk about constraints when you work within a large organization that impacts people and then we are spending taxpayers' monies, right? So we're always reminded as public servants, right, that we don't just change things for the sake of doing it. Everything must have a meaning. I came out with the first version, I showed it to my team. They were all quite supportive, but we all agreed that, right, after 7 iterations of that first map, we all agreed that it is not a priority now. So we decided that we want to focus our direction on the new sign system because it's a much more difficult problem to solve. And that's why the map was, I would say, shelved, like we put it aside for the time being, because I really wanted to focus the conversations we have with the management on what's really important, what needs to be solved. And the map is not the most critical thing to be solved on the network back then. So that already took us 1 year away from the idea. Then fast forward to, I think, 2 years, 2018 was when we really brought the map back. Because now we can package the new map, right, that we want to champion alongside the new sign system. So then now the whole system looks like a complete set. It opened the door. The new sign system, which took a lot of time to dissect and to design, opened the door for us to introduce, by the way, there's a new map. So in 2018, we looked at the map again. We also didn't launch it immediately because there was no new station or no new lines launching that year. So even though, yes, everybody agreed that, yeah, we shall use this map, but we have to wait for the right time. So when Canberra was going to be launched in 2019, we found that to be opportune timing to match the new launch of the map to Canberra's opening. Because to introduce that new station on the map across the entire network, you have to update the map. Yeah. So might also update it to the new design that we have. So that's why we waited 1 extra year for the map to finally be launched. But in reality, we took maybe, I would say, 1 year of real, investigative work, reiterations, and then checking with the users, management feedback, and then, back and forth. So yeah, the real work took about 1 year, but the over journey took about four years for it to come to fruition.
Because it has to wait for the right timing that makes sense.
Yeah. I obviously I wouldn't champion to say, oh, the new map is nicer, so let's just change it. Like that would never fly. It has to have meaning. It has to solve a problem.
So throughout your entire journey of designing and redesigning all the maps, right? What is the most difficult challenge? Name us, just share with us one most difficult challenge that you have faced throughout your entire journey of designing the maps.
Wow.
Actually, he cannot share one because there's 10,000 challenges he faced.
Yeah. You should put the disclaimer now.
Not representing
any
LTA.
LTA because I no longer work with the agency and also not representing the government because I'm also not a civil servant now. Yeah, so today's discussion and sharing is mainly my observation and my perspective.
Yeah.
Yeah, please don't go and witch hunt anyone. That's not the point, right?
Disclaimer.
Disclaimer.
Guys, disclaimer.
It's not LTA's perspective today. I would say that the map was difficult because the map itself wasn't the most difficult. The sign system was more difficult, right? But I would answer your question as a general, okay? In terms of the most difficult part, I think it would be to convince people. Yeah, to get the buy-in from the stakeholders within LTA, outside of LTA, our users, our commuters. That is, to me, much more difficult than designing. Because design is, it comes quite naturally to the practitioners.
Okay.
But when it comes to design that can be accepted and be acknowledged as useful and an improvement, right? I think that is something that even until today, I'm still asking myself, right? I would go to a station and I wonder, how could we have done this better? How could we have made this even better than what's up there? So I think the difficult part is the people, not the design. Does that answer your question?
Yeah. People's work is always the most difficult anyway.
Yeah.
In everywhere.
Yeah.
Wow, just curious, I'm here. I just want to ask Samuel, you've been on your metro passion for so many years of your life. So if I take on your newest map, right, and then I say, Samuel, what station is it on EW30?
No, I don't memorize the codes. But 30 should be Tuas. I mean near the Jurong side.
Near Gao Circle.
Yeah.
No, I wanted to say this because I have friends who goes on the internet. There's actually a game whereby we have they show us the whole MRT map, right? But everything is there's no names on it. So they just tell you EW30, you need to know the station. And I have friends who actually memorize the entire MRT stations.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's very good.
And I think visually it helps a lot because for me, I'm a visual person. I don't memorize by EW30 or 31, but I roughly know because our map looks like this right now. And I roughly know which station it's which instead of the numbers.
Yes.
And I think it really helped with this entire new redesigned map that you did.
Thank you
and your team
Thank
did.
You.
Yeah.
Yes.
All right, Samuel, one of the world's most influential metro system maps has to be the original London Tube map, designed by Harry Beck in 1933. Wow. Very, very long ago. So I can see the influence particularly in the 2001 map design. So do you often refer back to Harry Beck's design or you get inspiration from there or the principles just comes from Harry Beck's itself?
I think it's really nice that you brought up Harry Beck's map because it is the original schematic map, right? For some background, right, he is actually an engineer first, not a designer. But his understanding of engineering diagram helped him envision this map. Because before his map, right, everything is true to scale in terms of geography, which means that some of the lines are super long and stations are very far apart. And then within the city, like I mentioned earlier, it can become very congested.
Okay.
So when he introduced this idea of spacing everything evenly, it was revolutionary for its time. With that, it became I would say, a base map for everybody. Almost every city, you would, with a complex network, you can see the shadow of Harry Beck's original design. So whether I referred fervently to his original design, no, but I would say all of us are inspired by his original work for sure. And also, fun fact is that he introduced River Thames here as a guiding, sort of like a guiding for people to know what's on the side of the river. So I like to think that we are kind of paying homage to him as well for introducing Singapore River into our map.
Oh, so we need to bring up the map.
Yeah.
Let's put it side by side.
Obviously, this is just London, it's one city versus ours is a whole country.
Singapore.
Yeah. So, of course, there's going to be some difference. And the River Thames is neatly dividing London like that. And it stands true today. So, we have the current. This is much more updated version. You can see that, again, Harry Beck's design philosophy stands true. And it guides a lot of us map designers till today. And
So you would say that this is like a base, a nice base to start something out?
Yeah. Yeah, it's almost like a new language, I would say. He introduced this universal idea of representing a metro network. And then, of course, now you will see bus maps in many cities.
Yes.
Like in our neighbor, Jakarta, they have a very extensive bus map. So I would say all of us stem from Harry Beck's original design.
Well, I guess Harry Beck, one thing that Harry Beck might not be able to do is that, Samuel did the circle line as a geometric circle, which is what he didn't do.
Yeah, he didn't have a circle line back then, I think. And then, I mean, of course, today, London's circle line is still not a circle. It's this shape. But yeah.
No, everybody needs to see it. What shape is this?
No idea. Is this, okay? London's circle line.
This is London's circle line.
Yes. The word circle, how to say, Singapore's design we are very lucky that we are able to introduce the circle to the map. Yeah, I wouldn't say every single map should have a circle now, or if I redesign another city, I would do circle. Like in Thailand, maybe I can't do the circle. In London. I wouldn't think of trying to introduce the circle.
So it also still depends on the entire country's landscape or whatever. Like
and the design of the map. When I saw Moscow's circle line, I don't know if they call it circle line. I just saw 2 circles on the map. My first thought was, yes, the map is pretty, but also, wow, the planners were amazing because they planned for 2 circles to connect all their lines. And that made me realize that we should celebrate circle line on our network as well because it is designed with the same intent. It connects all the lines. And that's what made me feel confident enough to even attempt, the circle. It is kind of lucky that we had a line and then at the same time we have space to introduce the circle. It's not like having a circle on the map means it's a better map. Yeah, it's not that straightforward.
Lovely. So are you proud of your work today?
To be honest, right, it took me a while to accept.
Oh, why?
Yeah, because I was very, very nervous when we first introduced this. I was very worried about what the people would think because
Of circle line?
no, of like
everything.
everything.
Okay.
The map and then the sign system because it's a very big departure from where we had. You can see certain details that were left behind by the previous design still being clung onto the system. Then because of that, it kind of got overloaded over the years. And then one of the main thing I did was to declutter and to remove. And I worry about removing things that people are familiar with and what kind of backlash it may have. But fortunately, when we launched the map, it was very well received. The public was very warm about it. And I'm so thankful that just kind of like Singapore accepted it. Yeah, it's not easy for your design to just be accepted, right? And I'm sure there are still critics today, right? But overall, I would like to think that when people see the map, they are okay. And that's what makes me feel proud about it. It's not so much like, yeah, I designed it and it's there. I don't think there's a point. The point is when you see people use it or interact with it, you'll be like, okay lah, it's okay. People are actually using it. And that's what took me 5 years to like kind of be comfortable enough to sit here with you to talk about this. Yeah, because initially I was really very worried about the launch. Yeah.
I think it is a good work, like apart from, of course, like those connectivity lines, which can be a little bit confusing because it's still pretty new to us, especially like Outram Park. We have 3 lines on it, right? Yeah. But the rest are super straightforward via the map. And last time I used to have a lot of tourists asking me where to go, but right now I think there's fewer tourists asking us where to go unless they are on the connective lines like Outram Park or City Hall. So I guess it's doing its work.
Yeah.
Yeah. Edmund Tan, the one who did our map graphics work on the Lost Railway series. Sorry, Samuel, we have another question for you.
Okay.
So for Edmund Tan, we know him as Banana Solid on YouTube. And he's also the one that animated this fantastic evolution on the MRT map on his channel. Not sure if you have seen it before, which has over 1 million views now. Yeah, and he is also the guy who did our map graphics work for our Singapore Lost Railway series.
Nice.
So his question is definitely wayfinding related.
There's a lot of words on the page. I'm a bit worried.
Don't worry, it's just one question, I think. So with the new MRT overhead signage just showing the exit numbers, all commuters have to rely on the locality map directory to know which exit they need to use, which may be inconvenient or confusing for first-timers visiting that station. But I understand this was done to reduce the visual clutter and make things simpler. Did you initially have plans to include general landmarks beside the exit number on these signs? And was there maybe some objection from the other LTA team?
Wow, it's a very big question.
Yes.
I would say, well, to answer this question, right, I have to literally dissect the entire sign system. And that may take us hours because, to be fair, it took us 5 years to break down the existing system, build the new one, get buy-in, convince the management, So it's a lot to unpack there. But to answer Edmund very quickly, I would say, yes, we did think about introducing landmarks to the sign system. And in fact, it exists in some of the stations. So, for example, in Outram Park, you will see SGH placed. It will be mentioned because that's a key landmark for the station. Gardens by the Bay, the super trees actually exist on the sign system. One thing I wanted to address is that the word simplify is being used to describe the sign system a lot. Some people even mention oversimplification. Some mentioned it as simplifying the sign system. But I think what's an important note to understand, right, why I champion this idea of the new sign system on Thomson Line is that we wanted to have a universal language. So what was challenging before is that there's no consistent language between the user, the system, and the operator. So meaning, right, if I go to a station, I'll be expecting a certain landmark or an answer that I already have in my head. And that resulted in many years of signs being over-cluttered over the years. Actually, if I can dig out a photo to show you.
Of course.
I think Serangoon is a good example. Because recently I gave a talk about this. Let me dig it out.
Serangoon's my area.
Your hood. So you might be familiar with this. So, okay, just to show you a bit of a contrast, right? This is the existing system that we are talking about.
Okay.
This is the new system that Edmund is talking about. So the existing system, right, has significantly more words and landmarks, right? And by landmark, we mean maybe a mall, maybe street names. But in this instance, right, you can see that exit A, B, C, and D are all pointed to the same so-called landmark, which is Serangoon Central. Yeah. So it is this instance that really challenged the idea of at what point do we tell people what? I don't think this is very effective in terms of really helping you find the landmark. So in Serangoon, next to the station, basically there's a community club. Immediately next to it. And then the name is not Serangoon. So name-wise is already a bit disjoint, right? And then on top of that, you're like, if I need to go to that community club from here, there's no way you can get an answer here, right? So if, let's say, every day 50 people ask about that, let's just say, okay, for some reason it's a very popular community club, for example, you may eventually see a paper sign nearby to tell people that which exit belongs, will bring you to the community club. But I'm using that as an extreme example to show that, right, there's no way you can please everybody.
It's true.
In terms of landmark. In fact, if you notice, right, over on this sign, you have A, B, C, D, and then E, F, G is missing on the sign.
Yeah.
But H is mentioned because next is apparently important enough. And that's why I feel strongly that we need to create a common language. So what is the common language we are trying to do here? So in Outram Park, you can say that the exit codes are a common language. We now use the numbers to tell people which way to go. So that, okay, as a user, I can, instead of telling you, just meet me at the Balestier Community Club, okay, I could say, go to exit 2. Or if you are not aware, right, at the back here, the exit directory that also Edmund pointed out is where you'll get the full information of where the landmark is. Yeah, so there's no more guessing, because if you stand in front of this sign, right, and you can't find the answer, you wouldn't stand there and expect answer. But in the past, right, we have a lot of commuters who will stand in front of this sign and expect the answer to appear because it is so cluttered that you need time to digest it. And then after spending some time to digest and realize, oh, the answer isn't there, then you'll be like, better ask someone. Then you will go and disturb people, right? So what we're trying to do here is we want to help people self-help. If you don't know which exit code to use, and if the landmark is not mentioned, you can step aside, go to a centralized place that has all the information, and you can find your answer there. So that's the main difference. We want to declutter. But what Edmund was asking is that, was there intention to introduce landmarks? So this is a very tricky question because sometimes a landmark is very important to you. It's very important to me. It's very important to the person using there. I would say, okay, a hospital is important enough because this is a very key campus and therefore it is mentioned, right? And then a mall may be important, bus interchange may be important. So yeah, again, it's impossible to guess exactly what landmark you're looking for. So this is a phenomenon that we observe a lot. People standing in front of signs looking for answers.
That's me too.
Yeah. And we
Rangoon.
we don't want people to block the way like that. I would rather people stand near the information signs to look for answers themselves. And it's also less stressful, right? Not having people like standing in people's way. So this is essentially what we're trying to do. 99% of us can do it. Right? But if I put F to H, right, you will see the alphabet.
You're right.
Yeah, I cannot.
Okay, so I guess it's a very interesting talk that I had with Samuel. So why not just share with us what are you busy with right now since you are out from LTA years ago?
Okay, so after LTA, I actually moved on to join another government agency to do service design. And then after that, I joined Qatar Rail, which is similar to LTA. They design and build metro networks and tram networks in Qatar for Doha and Lusail. So over there, we worked on the World Cup wayfinding to help people find their way around the metro network for the World Cup. And then we also revamped the Lusail tram sign system. So then I came back to join Endpoint Singapore studio, where we work on many different projects like hospitals and very different from transport, basically, but still wayfinding, still helping people find their way around. Then after Endpoint, I started my own studio called Studio Lucidus. So it is a studio where we talk about not just designing of sign system. I noticed that in the industry, right, there is a gap between understanding what you're getting versus the design that we are proposing. So I wanted to fill in that gap by being an advisory in between, where we can, evaluate the wayfinding system that is being proposed by a consultant or designer and help the client understand that what they are getting may or may not work for them. Yeah, because on one hand, right, if I'm the designer or consultant, I'm of course going to back my own design up, right? Yeah. I'm going to tell you, this is the best you can get. But at the same time, as the client, you're like, I don't really know if it will work. I don't have expertise. So I feel that there's a need for a neutral person in between for the conversation. And then that's what I'm hoping to become. So that's why my studio exists. I want to play that advisory role to, sometimes, right, it's a simple change on the design, at the drawing block, right? Very early, and you can save a lot of headache down the road. And if we can just catch those things early enough, we don't need to spend a lot of money later to deal with that. Yeah, and I noticed that with a lot of projects, which is it's too late to solve. Yeah, if I could just tell the architects to shift a wall or reallocate the lifts just slightly, then there's no need for all the wayfinding, all the signs that is plastered around. So I'm hoping to improve wayfinding as a whole with this part that I can play, and not just about how pretty a sign looks or how nice a font is. Yeah, it's the logic behind it.
Why cure when you can prevent it in the first place?
Exactly. Yes, right? Yes, exactly that. Yeah.
Lovely. It's a nice talk with Samuel. If I could have a takeaway from our conversations that we have today, the work that you are doing or you have done is just to simplify and make things clearer so that people can actually be independent in the information that they can source themselves instead of like asking, people around them. And I think that that's amazing. I mean, to me, I rely a lot on MRT Maps. Orchard has exit numbers too, right?
Yes.
Thompson has it too. And I think it really helps to encourage you, like yourself, to find that piece of information too, with clarity of like enough sufficient information like placed in front of you.
Yes.
Yeah, and I think that is brilliant. It is improving. Yeah, Serangoon next?
Yeah, I'm hoping. I don't know, again, not speaking about LTA, I don't know whether what's the ambition? But like you rightly mentioned, right? So hopefully one day the conversations we have between the commuter and the external party, for example, a shopping mall, a shop, even inside the mall, I would comfortably tell you, you can find us at which exit code.
Lovely.
So then you can just find your way around using the numbers. Then that becomes the universal language for the station.
All right. Thank you so much, Samuel, for taking your time out to, share with us so many interesting facts about the MRT maps. And for everyone else out there, our comment box is still open. Let us know who you want us to bring up on the next podcast session, maybe. And also please support our channel because my director got no budget to invite someone interesting, yeah.
And then so he can invite me back and talk more.
Oh, yes,
I got a lot
yes,
more
yes.
things to talk about.
Yes, so thank you so much for your support.
Thank you for having me.
And thank you, Samuel, for joining us. Thank you, and we'll see you next time. Bye.
For the record, circle line is my least favorite.
Huh, really? Why?
I freaking love Circle Line, man.
Yeah.
Because it's always overcrowded.
Then 被 flame 了咯.
But if you compare Circle Line, right, with all the East-West line, it's crazy
It's
one.
like you never reach, eh?
Yeah,
Yeah.
it is crazy one.
But circle line at night at Bishan always getting crowded.
Yeah.
Connective lines lah, like
It's almost
Serang-
like it's too good for itself, right?
That's why they had to build Cross Island.
Yeah. I also feel Circle Line is too small.
But the connective lines, I agree that it's very crowded. But the rest, they're okay. The rest of the stops lah.